In 1917, a young woman in Orange, New Jersey, could paint 250 watch dials in a day and take home more money than her father earned in a mill. 5 years later, she was dead at 24, and her death certificate listed syphilis. The paint she used contained the most expensive substance on Earth, and measurements later taken from the bones of the women who applied it helped shape every radiation exposure limit in use today. This story did not begin with a lie. It began with a belief so complete that lying seemed unnecessary. And it begins in a Colorado mine, with tons of yellow rock reduced to something small enough to lose in the crease of a palm. Inside the painting studio, dust settled like flour in a bakery, on their hair, their eyelashes, and the good dresses they wore, because the wage justified a good dress. They were told it was harmless, so they used it. They painted their fingernails before dances. They painted their teeth so their smiles would glow across a dark room. One woman coated the buttons of her coat. Another worked the powder through her hair before a party. Nobody stopped them because in 1917, radium was a tonic, a treatment, and a cosmetic, and the girls handling it were envied. By the end of the 1920s, roughly 4,000 people in the United States and Canada had worked at those benches. The glow went home with every one of them. That was the part their neighbors noticed first. Their neighbors in Orange called them the Ghost Girls. At the end of a shift, they came onto the street with a faint green cast, still clinging to their collars and hair. The work existed because of the war. An artillery officer needed to read a compass in the dark. A pilot needed an instrument panel without a lamp. A soldier in a trench needed to see the time without striking a match and giving away his position. The United States Radium Corporation hired young women because their hands were small and steady, and because they could be paid less than men. The rate was 1.50 cents per dial. A fast painter finished 250 a day, earning about $3.75, nearly 3 times what she might make in a textile mill. Some were only 14 years old. The wage looked generous, but the real reason for that generosity was hidden 1 floor above them. The yellow rock came from the Colorado Plateau by the ton, because radium is one of the scarcest elements on Earth. Carnotite ore had to be crushed, roasted, dissolved, and precipitated through dozens of stages to produce a quantity of radium salt smaller than an aspirin tablet. A single gram cost roughly $120,000, when a house cost about $5,000. Think about that. $120,000 a gram, handed to a girl earning $3.75 a day to spread across glass. Not a drop could be wasted. The numerals on a watch dial were a fraction of a millimeter wide, and only a brush of fine camel hair could make a line that thin. But the brush lost its point after every stroke. There was one way to sharpen it that cost nothing and wasted nothing: lip, dip, paint. 1 floor above them, the same material was handled very differently. Chemists worked behind lead screens. They lifted the radium with long tongs and stored it in lead containers inside a lead safe. Sabine von Sochoki, the chief chemist, had invented the luminous paint and founded the company that sold it. He developed a lesion on his left hand that would not heal. Surgeons removed the finger. He kept working, and radium killed him in 1928. Yet nobody carried those screens downstairs, where the method remained: lip, dip, paint. 1 floor separated a pair of tongs held at arm's length from a wet brush, drawn between the lips. The women were told it was harmless, and many of the men saying it still believed that. Knowledge and protection existed in the same building, but they were not distributed equally. Radium was not seen as poison. Radium was medicine. It was sold as medicine everywhere. There was radium toothpaste, face cream, suppositories, wool for arthritis, German radium chocolate, and drinking water dispensed from ceramic crocks. The wealthiest customer was Eben Byers, a Pittsburgh industrialist and amateur golf champion. After injuring his arm in a fall from a train berth, he was prescribed a tonic called Radithor. He felt better, so he kept drinking it, 2 or 3 bottles a day. For years, roughly 1,400 bottles. His jaw disintegrated, holes opened in his skull, and he died in 1932. He was buried in a lead-lined coffin, behind the same shielding the chemists in Orange had used while alive. The Wall Street Journal reported the case under the headline, "The radium water worked fine until his jaw came off." The Federal Trade Commission moved against the tonic industry within months, and the public finally began to understand what radium could do inside a human body. Women in New Jersey had been dying for a decade. It took a millionaire. The first was Maggia. In 1921, at 23, she developed a toothache. A dentist pulled the tooth, and an ulcer formed in the gap. He pulled the tooth beside it, and the ulcer spread. What was destroying her jaw sat directly below calcium on the periodic table. The body cannot reliably tell radium from calcium, so it stores radium in the skeleton. Radium throws off alpha particles, which a sheet of paper can stop, and which cannot pass through skin from the outside. Inside bone, there is no barrier. The particles strike the surrounding tissue and marrow at point-blank range, every second, waking and sleeping. Every dial added a little more. Lip, dip, paint. 250 times a day. By the spring of 1922, her bones were failing. When her dentist reached into her mouth that May, he did not extract a tooth. Her lower jaw came away in his fingers, in pieces, without surgery and without force. She lived another 4 months as the decay reached her throat, and died in September when the tissue around her jugular vein gave way. She was 24. The same process was already beginning, in women still sitting at the benches. Spontaneous fractures of the hip and spine, anemia as the marrow failed, a necrosis so specific that dentists would soon call it radium jaw. Molly had been told the paint was harmless. Her death certificate listed syphilis, a diagnosis that shamed her family, closed the file, and placed no obligation on anyone. If you are finding this story worth your time, subscribe. We cover stories like this every week, and there is still a great deal to come. One of the women refused the diagnosis she was given. Grace Fryer had left the Dial studio in 1920 for a job as a bank teller. 2 years later, her teeth loosened, her jaw began to break down, and her spine collapsed until she needed a steel brace to sit upright. It took 2 years to find a lawyer willing to represent her. The defendant was a corporation, the science was new, and the plaintiff was a young woman with no money. In 1927, she found Raymond Berry. But the law contained a trap. An injured worker had 2 years from the date of exposure to file a claim, while radium poisoning could take 5 to 10 years to appear. The clock expired before the injury became visible. Every woman was already too late on the day she learned what was happening to her. 4 other painters joined the case, and newspapers named them the Radium Girls. All 5 were dying while the motions were argued. In 1928, the case was settled out of court. Each woman received $10,000, $600 a year, for as long as she lived, and coverage of her medical expenses. $10,000 for a body destroyed by a substance worth $120,000 a gram. The settlement contained no admission of liability. There was never a verdict. The proof had been underground since the autumn of 1927. Molly Maggia had been buried for 5 years when her body was exhumed by court order. Samples of her bones were placed on unexposed photographic paper in a darkroom, with no camera and no light. Over the following days, an image appeared. Her bones had photographed themselves. The jaw that had come away in a dentist's hand was still radioactive enough to expose film 5 years after burial. The syphilis diagnosis was finished as an explanation. But in Illinois, the work continued. In Ottawa, the Radium Dial Company kept its line running through the 1920s. Its painters were told the same thing. The paint was harmless. Margaret Looney had worked there since the studio opened. She died in 1929, at 24, and physicians retained by her employer recorded diphtheria. Her family was not allowed to view the body before burial, and pieces of bone had been removed from her jaw and kept. When she was exhumed in 1978, 49 years later, her remains were still measurably radioactive. She was reburied in a lead-lined casket. Radium-226 has a half-life of 1,600 years, longer than the span between the fall of Rome and today. The material in her bones had barely begun to fade. That permanence made the dial painters the most closely studied group of poisoned workers in history. From the 1960s onward, the Center for Human Radiobiology at Argonne National Laboratory traced and measured roughly 2,400 former painters, living and dead. Because both the intake and the outcome could be measured, their records produced what no ethical experiment ever could: a dose-response curve for radiation inside the human body. That curve helped set limits for radium, then for plutonium, in the workers who built the first atomic weapons, and later for exposure standards used in laboratories, reactors, and hospitals. This was not simply an industrial accident. It was a belief, and the belief cost nothing to hold. The story of the dial painters runs from a Colorado mine to a New Jersey courtroom to an Illinois cemetery, and it is written into the safety rules of every building where radiation is handled today. It was there when the first luminous wristwatch was strapped onto a soldier. It was there when a millionaire was buried in lead. It was there when 5 dying women signed a settlement that admitted nothing. Tons of yellow rock were reduced to a smear small enough to lose in the crease of a palm, and that smear rewrote what an employer was permitted to do to a body. It built a fortune. It killed the women who handled it. It helped create the rules that protect everyone who came after them. And somewhere, it may still be sitting in an old drawer, inside a wind-up watch with a cracked strap, its hands holding the faintest green glow. If this story surprised you, subscribe for more deep dives into the true price of the ordinary things around you. We have a lot more coming.